Hello everybody and welcome, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Dimir control versus mono red aggro deck in a best of 3 battle in MTG Arena. Now this is my first battle commentary, so be easy on me a little. And we're started. Just as it is so common of the red decks, he puts in a 1 mana creature, mostly for attacking. For those who don't know, these colors, these lands and everything. Now the game itself is pretty complicated and you can look on it yourselves, but those who are familiar with the game will know that the red decks, especially mono reds, are based on destroying your opponent as quickly as possible before they can stabilize the game. And now we have with the release of the new sets, we have a different kind of mono red, which centers around not just creatures but also creatures and spells on equal measure as a source of their damage. And so we have my opponent putting in the electric field, Gitu Lavarar, and then a lightning strike. Now electrical field, what it does every time you do damage, it adds 1 more. So if you can stack up those damages quickly, it will do quite a bit of damage. Now here you see me selecting the land, and the Dimir, the deck that I'm playing, is more on a control side. It does have a few creatures, as you can see from my hand, and it aims to stabilize the game. And here you see me in an attempt to stabilize it, countering my opponent's damage dealing ability. I surveil, which allows me to look at my library and gives me an option to throw the next card into the graveyard. And now we have my opponent attacking. Now the game is still in my opponent's favor, and I attempt to stabilize it with a Doom Whisper, a 6/6/6 for 5. A great creature with its unique ability to surveil 2 cards for 2 life, which is a feature that I won't be using against aggro decks such as these. So we got Viashino Pyromancer. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Now we have 3 creatures versus 1, so even if I do attempt to block, some of them will get through, and you can see my opponent trying to get my health down with direct damage that I can only prevent with a counterspell. Now, of course, that's all well and good. Now with my opponent top decking, I need to take out his health as quickly as possible as well to end the match, because I am top decking at this point as well. So my main option here, at least in my opinion, was to just do that damage and force him into defensive and just give up. And as mono red deck, you cannot just go into defensive. It's very rare that a mono red deck will be able to pull back from being pushed back into a defensive position and then push forward. Only with enough removal and damage spells will you be able to do that. Now that my health has went down to below 8, I have to be very careful with how I use my life as a resource. You see, because victory, whether you are at 20 or 1, does not matter. You still win regardless. And now my opponent has put in the second electrical field. It is a defender creature with a 0/4, which makes it very difficult to remove with like minus wither spells, so that give you -2 health. For those who do not know, the wither is one of the ways to kill a creature, even if it is indestructible, because it is not considered destroyed, it's considered withered, which is a pretty interesting concept. Now you see me basically losing a 12 damage from my opponent over there, although he would be able to attack me back, so I would have been at 6 damage. So as I'm watching this, I'm also learning from my mistakes or potential mistakes. So see, here you see me whispering. So we have our red player using a Lightning Mare, whose ability I have just discovered in that game. I read about it, but I thought it was once per turn, so he could only do it once, but I forgot that it does not give a stop to it. Now I'm using a Disinformation Campaign, which discards my opponent a card and draws me a card. And I draw another Disinformation Campaign. Yeah, I might have forgot to remove some of the audio. Which makes me pull a land, which I use to cast my spells. At this point, had I been more aggressive, I might have been able to finish the game, but that would be relying so much on the of my aggression ability rather than defense, and not my opponent not pulling a direct damage spell with those electrical fields. However, the good thing about control decks, especially Dimir control, is that they are quite modular. So in the next battle, I will have a chance to look at my sideboard, and I will be able to put up counters against it. Now, as you can see, my opponent powered up his creature, leaving me on 1 health, which with the card he pulls next, he will be able to win. Now, had I been attacking, this battle would have been over, so there wasn't much I could do with this deck from what I'm seeing. And so he does the direct current and wins the battle by bringing my health to 0. Now, I would say the reason that the Dimir control lost in this one was because it wasn't built enough. Now you see me sideboarding really quick. I'm removing like longer term expensive spells in favor of much faster, lower cost removal spells, especially the ones that can give me some health, such as what was a Moment of Craving, and I've replaced them with I replaced the Raska's Contempt, which is 4 mana removal. I added more dead weight, and we see me pulling my removal in my first hand. Let's see how this one progresses. Now, because it is best of 3, if my opponent wins once more, he will win this match. This is a competitive match, so there is a few things on the line, and not just the rank, because if you lose 2 times, you just lose, and you lose that gold that you have invested if you have not won enough times. So now you see me responding to my opponent's early move with my early removal. And that is how the control play is, stabilizing, preventing the opponent from capturing that dominance, that board state. The way I like to remind it to myself is that a clean board state always benefits the control player. The more control a deck is, the more they benefit from it, because they gain this mana base every turn. Now I use Thought Erasure to look at my opponent's hand and discard a card from his hand, and then surveil 1. I see that my next spell is a -2/-2 removal, which will be able to counter his next aggressive creature. And I also know his hand, so I can predict what he's gonna bring in. Using surveil, I put the card in the bottom to the front, which gives me my land for the next turn. I would not be able to cast the counter spell for this turn, regardless. So he uses a shock, which is 1 mana, 2 damage ability, just like a quick shock, just to get rid of it from his hand. I see that he has no mana. My opponent is very unlucky. He does not pull any land, as such is not able to put anything on the field. Now, the aggro decks most oftentimes work with very little mana base. So 3 mana is usually what they really need to cast all of their spells, at least one of them. And so here you see me, my deck has worked last time, and so it's a 1-1. Now we go to the final game. It is quite fascinating, this whole game. I honestly did not even notice that this battle, these best of 3 matches took more than around 14-15 minutes. Now we see my opponent dropping his quick ones. Ritual of Soot is exactly what I need to stabilize the game in this case, because it wipes out everything that is less than 3 mana cost, and in my deck I had only 1 creature card that fits that criteria. Now I look at his hand, Risk Factor. Risk Factor is a very fascinating card. It's as you might have read, it either your opponent gets to pick, either they're going to take 4 damage, or are you, as the caster, will draw 3 cards. Both options very dangerous, and here I choose to take the 4 damage. 3 turns in, I play my Detection Tower, which I keep in my deck against things like Wine Mares. I surveil my hand and I see that I have a counterspell. I choose to keep it, which might have been a mistake, of course. My opponent puts the electrical field over here. I look at the situation, and I've got 2 Moments of Craving in my hand, which will do -2/-2, and will give me 2 health, bringing me back to 20. Now this is a very bad situation for my opponent, because one of the greatest assets when playing control versus aggro is how many cards do you have in your hand. The card advantage becomes quite important. With my opponent just being rapid fire damage, and this Disinformation Campaign makes a direct difference, sets a distinct card advantage, because it has me draw a card and my opponent discard. Now, of course, there can be ironic situations where you draw more Disinformation Campaigns, and if you have enough mana base, you can chain them together. However, it's a very situational card, to be honest, and I don't think it will be competitive. This is just a fun little deck that I was wondering how annoying I could get with the Disinformation Campaign and its second ability, the Surveil, bringing it back to your hand. Now you see my opponent has only 1 card in hand, and the other card being a Jumpstart. In order to cast this Jumpstart, he will need a discard a card, which is great. I find it to be quite similar, combined with the Dimir, to be able to cycle lands which went out of rotation from in the standard. Now you see my opponent having 1 card, 6 life advantage, which can be easily resolved. And here I guess my Doom Whisper, knowing that my opponent does not have the necessary power to take him out. Even if he does, there are some spells that do that much damage, but I just find it unlikely that my opponent would have them. I mean, Banefire is probably in his deck, but that's best cast on the opponent as a finishing move rather than creature. Of course, it's all situation. That's the beauty of this game. Now you see me surveilling too. The Discovery and Dispersal is a wonderful card. It's so modular. Yeah, like you can sort your hand, surveil 2, draw a card, and which triggers the Disinformation Campaign. We see this very nice combo going on over here. The auto tap, fortunately, has kept the 2 blue mana open, and if you look at my hand, you will see I have 2 negates, which will prevent my opponent from playing their cards. The Disinformation Campaign has this beautiful side effect. Even when your opponent is top decking, in combination with counter spells, you're just able to make him skip that turn, and now the advantage swings to the control player. Now that empty field and build-up of mana benefiting the control player is truly shown. Now there is one new card that makes things interesting, which is the Experimental Frenzy, which allows you to play the cards directly from the top of your deck. Now that I see my opponent has 2 cards, I will be able to utilize the Disinformation Campaigns to its full effects. Now that we see the control deck turning that whole game around very confidently. Now, of course, this is not exactly a professional game or anything, but just to show you the idea behind it, how confidently, even if you are using with a versatile deck, you are able to turn things around with a bit of luck and the right cards within your sideboard. And of course, a bit of playstyle changes as well. I've got a Lightning Strike. I figure he is trying to kill off my Doom Whisper. And my opponent realizes the situation, the desperation of it, and the victory is won. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.